Do you ever wonder what happened to those Christmas cookies that used to fill Grandma's kitchen every December? The ones that made the whole house smell like cinnamon and butter and something you cannot quite name but would recognize anywhere. These are not the cookies from magazines or bakery windows. These were the cookies shaped by her flour-dusted hands, baked in dented pans she had owned for 30 years, and served on mismatched plates that somehow made them taste even better. What happened to those flavors we grew up with? When did we stop making them? Brown sugar butter cookies. Brown sugar butter cookies were born for necessity during wartime rationing, but they ended up tasting like pure celebration anyway. When white sugar became difficult to get in the 1940s, brown sugar stepped in and gave cookies one of the richest, most caramel-forward flavors a simple dough could ever hold. Grandma would press the soft, sticky sugar against the side of the bowl with her wooden spoon, mashing into the butter until the two became inseparable. That spoon was older than most of the people in the house, its handle worn smooth from decades of use. And somehow it made everything taste better. The dough came out smooth and golden brown, almost amber when the light hit it right. During the holidays, Grandma's kitchen was chaos. There were pots bubbling on every burner, the oven door opening and closing every 15 minutes, and at least 3 people trying to stir something at the same time. But when these cookies came out of the oven, everything paused. Just for a moment, the noise softened, and the scent drifted through the house like a reminder that even when money was tight and ingredients were scarce, sweetness could still be shared. The cookies had soft, chewy centers that practically melted on your tongue, and their edges crisped up just enough to give each bite some texture. The flavor was buttery and deep, with notes of caramel that lingered long after you finished eating. People want them back, not because they were fancy or impressive, but because they tasted like effort, care, and the determination to create something joyful out of very little. Chocolate Crinkle Cookies. Chocolate Crinkle Cookies were the Christmas cookies that looked like they had just rolled out of a snowstorm and landed directly on Grandma's cooling rack. The mid-century kitchen practically revolved around them during December because they felt festive before you even took your first bite. Grandma would mix the dark, fudgy dough until it was nearly black, so rich and chocolatey it looked almost too intense to be real. Then she would chill it overnight in the refrigerator because she insisted that was the only way to make the dough behave properly and roll into balls without sticking to everything in sight. Rolling each ball in powdered sugar was always the fun part, especially when her hands emerged looking like she had been handling fresh snow all morning. As the cookies baked, they puffed up and cracked dramatically, creating those beautiful white fissures across the dark surface that made every kid in the house hover near the oven window like they were watching a science experiment. The smell was deep and intensely chocolatey in a way plain cocoa powder never quite delivers anymore. Rich without being heavy, sweet without overwhelming your taste buds. When you bit into one, the outside was delicate and slightly crisp like a thin shell of sweetness, while the inside stayed soft and brownie-like. They tasted like the holidays you remember from old photographs, full of warm lights, cold nights, and something always baking in the oven long before dessert was officially scheduled. Cornmeal Teacakes. Cornmeal Teacakes proved that Grandma never needed expensive ingredients to create something unforgettable. These humble little cookies came straight out of Depression-era necessity, born in kitchens where every ingredient had to stretch further than it wanted to go. But somehow they carried their magic well past those hard years, showing up at holiday tables throughout the 1940s and 50s like they belonged there all along. Cornmeal was cheap, reliable, and always available, even when flour ran low. Grandma knew exactly how to coax it into something golden and tender. She would mix it with just enough flour to give it structure, add whatever sugar she could spare, and work in butter when she had it or shortening when she did not. The dough came together quickly, almost stubbornly, but her hands knew how to gentle it into submission. When they baked, the kitchen filled with a warm, grainy sweetness that smelled like comfort itself. These were never the glossy cookies you saw in magazines or department store windows. They were the ones you ate while they were still warm, holding a cup of coffee or tea in your other hand, standing at the kitchen counter because sitting down felt too formal for something this simple. They were the cookies Grandma handed out before dinner even started, saying take one to tide you over, even though she knew you would take 3. Cousins fought over them. Adults pretended they were just okay while secretly loving every crumb. And the plate always emptied long before anyone made it to the table. They tasted like home, like history, like the kind of lessons you learn through watching hands work rather than reading words on paper. That is why people still miss them, even if they cannot explain exactly what made them special. Molasses drop cookies. Molasses drop cookies were one of those quiet kitchen miracles that showed up every Christmas without fanfare or fuss. They were soft, deeply spiced, and carried the entire spirit of winter in a single bite, even though they looked almost plain sitting on the cooling rack. During the Depression, and well in the 1950s, when white sugar cost more than most families wanted to spend on dessert, molasses became the dependable sweetener that never let anyone down. Grandma kept a jar of it in the back of her pantry, the thick, dark syrup moving slower than honey, and she poured it into the mixing bowl with the confidence of someone who had done this exact thing 100 Decembers in a row. She never measured it with a spoon. She just tipped the jar until it looked right, watching that ribbon of blackstrap fall into the flour and butter like liquid gold. The dough came together slowly under her wooden spoon, and she would add cinnamon by the pinch, ginger by the shake, and sometimes a little clove if she remembered where she put it. But somehow, no matter what she did or did not add, those cookies always tasted exactly like memory itself. When they baked, the whole house transformed into something warmer than the thermostat could ever manage. The scent wrapped around you like a quilt someone had just pulled from the dryer, and you could smell it from the front porch before you even opened the door. The cookies came out soft in the center with edges that crisped just enough to give a little resistance before melting on your tongue. They were rich without being heavy, spiced without being overwhelming, and they never once needed frosting to feel complete. These cookies made Christmas feel like Christmas, even in years when there was no tree or decorations. They gave more than they asked for, and that is exactly why we miss them. Pecan Sandies. Pecan Sandies were the kind of Christmas cookie that only appeared when Grandma felt like spoiling the entire family, because pecans were expensive and using them meant the day was special. When she pulled out that small paper sack of holiday pecans, the one she had been saving since Thanksgiving, you knew you were about to eat something that mattered. She chopped them by hand using a knife that desperately needed sharpening, refusing to use the electric chopper someone had bought her years ago because she insisted you could feel the recipe better when you did it the old way. Nobody understood what she meant by that, but somehow she was always right. The dough was buttery and soft, almost crumbly even before it went anywhere near the oven. And when she folded those hand-chopped pecans into it, it felt like watching a winter ritual that had been passed down through so many generations nobody could remember where it started. The cookies baked up tender with that delicate, sandy texture that melted the instant it touched your tongue. They were sweet without being cloying, nutty without overwhelming you, and rich in a way that made you wonder how something so small could feel so luxurious. People today talk about minimalism like they invented it last week. But Grandma was mastering that art long before anyone turned simplicity into a trend. She took butter, flour, sugar, and nuts and created cookies that felt like holiday gifts wrapped in memory. The best part was that she always made them right when the tree lights were plugged in for the first time, when someone had just put on a record of carols, and the house felt warm in that impossible-to-describe way only December evenings manage. These cookies were never about showing off. They were about generosity, tradition, and that rare feeling of being reminded you were loved through something baked by hand. That is why we want them back. Old-fashioned ginger molasses snaps. Old-fashioned ginger molasses snaps were the cookies that announced winter had officially arrived, whether anyone was ready for it or not. They were crisp, sharp, and packed with a ginger heat that hit you right in the back of the throat in the best possible way. Grandma loved making these because they warmed the entire house, not just the oven, and when she opened that Old Spice tin, everyone in earshot paid attention. Ginger was strong, assertive, and kind of bossy in the flavor department, and Grandma respected it the way you respect an old friend who always tells you the truth. She would add molasses for depth and richness, flour to hold everything together, and then somehow mix it all like the dough was giving her instructions instead of the other way around. The dough always felt alive under her hands, sticky and fragrant and full of promise. When the cookies baked, they spread into perfect little circles with those signature cracks running across the top like tiny maps of every winter holiday that ever mattered. Biting into one was like experiencing an entire season compressed into a single moment. First came the snap, that satisfying crack between your teeth. Then came the spice, rolling across your tongue in waves. And finally came the warmth, spreading down your chest like someone had lit a small candle somewhere inside you. These cookies did not need frosting or decorations or any kind of fanciness to make them memorable. They had personality built right in. They had history baked into every crack. And they had the kind of bold flavor that made you remember being a child, even if you had not thought about those years and decades. Vanilla tea cakes. Vanilla tea cakes were one of Grandma's most traditional Christmas treats, and she approached them with the kind of seriousness other people reserve for wedding cakes or important dinners. They looked simple, almost plain, but tasted like every winter memory rolled into one tender cookie. She would start by creaming the butter and sugar together, working them in the bowl like she was waking them up from a long sleep. Then came the vanilla, and not just any vanilla. She used the good kind, the extract she kept hidden in the back of the cupboard like a family secret. The bottle she had been nursing since someone brought it back from trip years ago. The dough was thick and smooth, almost clay-like in texture, and when she rolled it into small rounds and placed them on the baking sheet, it felt like she was planting tiny holiday moments that would bloom in the oven. They puffed slightly as they baked, their tops cracking gently in that perfect way that made them look homemade rather than store-bought. The smell filled the house with a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with belonging. These were the cookies you sneaked off the cooling rack when Grandma turned her back to check on the roast. They were the ones you dunked in cold milk while everyone else was setting the table, trying to finish before anyone noticed half the batch was already gone. Grandma never wrote this recipe down, and when people asked for it, she would just shrug and say she did not really follow one. The truth was, the recipe lived in her hands, her instincts, and the way she cooked for love rather than precision. That is exactly why we want them back now. Buttermilk drop cookies. Buttermilk drop cookies were the soft, tender little treats Grandma made when she wanted something comforting without needing to bother with rolling pins, cookie cutters, or any of that fussy business. All she needed was a bowl, a carton of buttermilk, a splash of vanilla, a generous pinch of nutmeg, and that uncanny instinct she always possessed for knowing exactly when a batter had reached the right consistency. She would drop spoonfuls of the dough onto the baking sheet, each one imperfect and lopsided in its own charming way, but somehow they all baked into exactly the shape they were meant to be. The house filled with the kind of smell that made everyone wander into the kitchen without being called, drawn by something they could not quite name, but recognized immediately. These cookies had a gentle flavor, warm and familiar, with just enough nutmeg to make them feel like Christmas, even though they were simple enough to eat any time of year without feeling out of place. When you bit into one, it was soft in that way only a drop cookie made with love and buttermilk can achieve. Tender through the middle and lightly golden around the edges, with a texture that made you want to eat them slowly. They were the cookies you grabbed before anyone else noticed they were ready. The ones Grandma handed out while she was still cooking dinner, saying just one now, even though she always let you sneak two. Coconut Macaroon Mounds. Coconut Macaroon Mounds were one of those Christmas treats that made you feel like the holiday table had suddenly taken a trip somewhere tropical, even when the world outside was frozen solid and the snow was piling up like nobody's business. When canned coconut became easier to find in grocery stores during the 1950s, Grandma acted like she had just unlocked a secret level in cooking. She mixed the shredded coconut with sweetened condensed milk or beaten egg whites, depending on what she had available, and shaped the mixture into small snowy mounds that looked like they belonged on a winter postcard. Then she baked them until the bottoms turned the palest shade of gold and the tops stayed white as fresh snow. The smell alone could make anyone believe in Christmas magic, even the cynics. They were chewy, sweet, and rich without trying too hard or making a fuss about themselves. The kind of cookie you popped into your mouth between wrapping presents and pretending you had not already eaten 5 when nobody was looking. And if Grandma decided to dip the bottoms in melted chocolate, which she did some years when she felt generous, that was basically a holiday miracle worth writing home about. These cookies were small but mighty, simple but deeply satisfying, and they always felt like treats meant for children, even though the adults consistently stole the last one off the plate. That is the kind of dessert people miss most. The kind that tastes like a warm memory, even while you're still holding it. Oatmeal Raisin Spice Cookies. Oatmeal Raisin Spice Cookies made winter feel warmer the second you walked through Grandma's front door. Oats were cheap and filling. Raisins lasted practically forever without spoiling, and the spice tin only saw daylight during Christmas. So you knew the holidays had officially started when she reached for it. She mixed the dough with serious determination, her wooden spoon moving in steady circles as she folded in nutmeg, cinnamon, and whatever else she decided made sense that particular year. Sometimes there was clove. Sometimes there was allspice. Once, she added cardamom because someone told her it was what the Scandinavians used, and she wanted to see what all the fuss was about. The dough smelled like bottled comfort, and the cookies baked into golden-edged, soft-centered treats that no modern recipe has ever quite managed to recreate. They were practical and filling enough to count as breakfast if you were desperate, but also secretly tender in a way that made you realize Grandma was using cookies to show affection without having to say it out loud. Every bite held decades of small adjustments she never bothered writing down. A little more cinnamon one year because she felt like it. Fewer raisins another year because the store was out. But somehow they always tasted right, always tasted like hers. That is why they linger in memory the way they do. They were warmth disguised as dessert, and the holidays felt whole because of them. Date nut cookies. Date nut cookies were the kind of treat that made you feel like the holiday season had a little wisdom baked directly into it. They were rich, deeply chewy, and loaded with chopped dates and walnuts that somehow tasted like grown-up sweetness, even when you were just a kid sneaking one off the cooling rack. Dates were a winter staple in Grandma's kitchen because they lasted forever without spoiling, sitting in the pantry like patient little time capsules of concentrated sugar. And nuts were always a holiday splurge, the ingredient that made the whole recipe feel like something special rather than just another cookie. Grandma would chop the dates by hand, which turned the kitchen into a sticky battlefield and left the cutting board looking like it had been through some kind of caramel disaster. But she never complained once. She said the dates were worth the trouble, and honestly, she was right every single time. The dough was soft, sweet, and wonderfully fragrant, thick enough to feel hearty and substantial, but still light enough to bake into perfect little cookies that made you feel cozy from the inside out. When they came out of the oven, the edges were golden brown, the centers stayed chewy, and the smell immediately transformed the house into a place where time slowed down just enough for everyone to actually enjoy the moment. These cookies were comforting, nostalgic, and old-fashioned in the absolute best way possible. They tasted like the holidays Grandma actually lived through, not the commercial ones we see plastered everywhere now, but the real ones built from family, intention, and whatever ingredients happen to be available. Lemon-Glazed Sugar Cookies. Lemon-Glazed sugar cookies were the kind of Christmas treat that brightened the entire kitchen the moment Grandma pulled a single lemon from the fruit bowl, like it was some kind of secret weapon she had been saving for exactly this occasion. These cookies started simple enough. Just a basic sugar dough she mixed with the same casual confidence she brought to everything else. But the real magic happened at the very end, after the cookies had cooled. While they sat on the counter, Grandma would whisk together a bright, glossy lemon glaze that smelled like sunshine sneaking into a winter morning when you least expected it. She never measured the lemon juice with spoons or cups. She just squeezed the fruit until it felt right, tasting the glaze with her pinky finger and adding more sugar or more juice depending on what her instincts told her. And somehow, every single time, it was perfect. When she drizzled that glaze over the warm cookies, it slid across the surface like liquid light, settling into every crack and crevice the way memories settle into old holiday traditions. These cookies did not shout for attention with sprinkles or frosting flowers or fancy decorative shapes. They were quiet, light, sweet, and bright in a way that made you close your eyes for just a second to fully appreciate what you were tasting. They tasted like the moment someone plugged in the Christmas lights for the first time each year. That instant when everything suddenly felt possible again. Chocolate oat no-bake cookies. Chocolate oat no-bake cookies were the absolute heroes of every Christmas season when the oven was already jammed full of pies, hams, casseroles, and whatever else Grandma had decided needed to bake for 2 hours straight. She would melt butter, cocoa powder, sugar, and milk together in one pot on the stovetop, stirring constantly until the mixture thickened into something rich and fudgy and almost too good to be true. Then she would dump in the oats, stirring fast to coat every piece before the mixture cooled, and drop generous spoonfuls onto sheets of wax paper to set. These cookies cooled quickly, which made them an absolute lifesaver when unexpected company showed up at the door or when someone desperately needed dessert in the next 20 minutes. They were rustic, imperfect, and entirely addictive in that way only Grandma's emergency cookies could possibly be. They stuck to your fingers a little bit, stuck to your memories a whole lot, and filled the house with a chocolate sweetness that never once needed an oven timer to be perfect. Sweet potato spice cookies. Sweet potato spice cookies were one of Grandma's most quietly brilliant inventions, especially in African-American homes where sweet potatoes were practically a love language all by themselves. Anytime there were leftovers from Sunday dinner, or if Grandma simply felt like roasting extra sweet potatoes for just in case, you could guarantee some of them would end up transformed into cookie form by the following weekend. She mashed the sweet potatoes until they were silky smooth, their orange flesh turning into a puree that looked almost too pretty to bake with. Then she mixed them with the spices that always felt like they belonged more to December than any other month. Cinnamon, nutmeg, maybe a whisper of clove if the jar was not sitting empty. The dough turned this beautiful, soft orange color that somehow felt festive even before it went into the oven. And when the cookies emerged, they were tender, cake-like, and warm in a way that made you want to sit at Grandma's kitchen table forever. These cookies were special because they carried history in every single bite. The resourcefulness of using what you had instead of running to the store. The tradition of sweet potatoes in black cooking, stretching back generations further than anyone could trace. And the joy of turning an everyday ingredient into something unforgettable. They tasted like generosity, like culture, like winter afternoons spent in a warm kitchen where everyone was welcome. Black walnut Christmas cookies. Black walnut Christmas cookies were the kind of treat that tasted like tradition itself, the kind you could not fake even if you tried. Black walnuts were not something you casually picked up at the grocery store back then. They were gathered from the ground in autumn, cracked open with considerable effort and sore hands, or gifted by neighbors who understood exactly how precious they were. Their flavor was bold, earthy, and unmistakable in a way that regular English walnuts could never match. The kind of taste that announced itself the moment it hit your tongue. Grandma would fold the hand-chopped black walnuts into a simple butter dough that let the nuts take center stage without competition. When the cookies baked, the smell was deep and warm, with that powerful walnut scent filling every corner of the kitchen and drifting into rooms where people were trying to wrap presents or read the newspaper. These cookies were not flashy or covered in sugar. They were grown-up, thoughtful, and full of the kind of complex flavor that made you pause mid-bite just to appreciate what you were tasting. Every cookie carried more than flavor. It carried family stories, winter nights spent cracking shells by hand, and the quiet pride that comes from turning something gathered and worked for into something beautiful. Jam Thumbprint Cookies. Jam Thumbprint Cookies were Grandma's way of turning a spoonful of homemade preserves into a moment of pure holiday joy that everyone looked forward to every single year. Strawberry, peach, blackberry, whatever jam she had put up that summer suddenly became the jewel-toned heart of a Christmas cookie everyone waited for. Grandma would roll the dough into soft little balls between her palms and press her thumb right into the center, creating a tiny cradle for whatever jar she decided to open that day. The jam glistened like miniature stained glass windows once the cookies baked, warm and bubbling slightly, filling the kitchen with a sweet fruit smell that could make anyone smile regardless of what kind of day they had been having. The cookies themselves were buttery and soft, simple and wonderfully comforting. The perfect neutral base for the bright burst of fruit jam sitting in the middle. They were the kind of treat kids raced toward the minute they spotted them on the counter, and adults pretended not to love quite as much as they actually did. These cookies felt alive with memory, packed with summer sweetness carefully preserved for winter warmth. They were proof that Grandma could make joy out of absolutely anything. Even the last few spoonfuls of fruit she had saved carefully through the entire year. Brown butter nutmeg cookies. Brown butter nutmeg cookies were the kind of holiday treat Grandma made when she wanted the whole house to smell like warmth itself had somehow been baked in an edible form. The moment she melted the butter in her saucepan and let it cook until it turned golden brown and nutty, you knew something genuinely special was about to happen. That scent alone, rich and toasted and impossibly good, could make any room feel like Christmas even before she added a single other ingredient. Then came the sugar, the flour, and the spice she guarded more carefully than her good jewelry. Fresh nutmeg. She would pull out the small grater and the whole nutmeg, scraping it gently like she was coaxing out the last bits of concentrated magic. The dough turned soft and wonderfully fragrant, full of toasty, spiced sweetness that felt like stepping directly into the warmest hug you have ever received. When the cookies baked, the edges turned crisp and golden while the center stayed impossibly soft, and each bite melted away on your tongue like a memory you were not quite ready to let go of yet. They tasted old-fashioned in the absolute best way, like something you would only ever find in a grandmother's kitchen, never in any store or bakery. The warmth of the brown butter and the gentle glow of fresh nutmeg blended into a flavor that felt like winter evenings, quiet conversations over tea, and the gentle kind of love that lasts long after the holidays have ended. Cane syrup ginger cookies. Cane syrup ginger cookies were Southern kitchen legends, born in places where cane syrup sat on the counter year-round like a trusted friend who never let you down. When refined white sugar was either too expensive or too precious to use freely, the syrup stepped in and gave everything a deep amber sweetness that tasted like history itself. Grandma would pour it into the mixing bowl with slow, steady hands, letting the thick syrup ribbon through the spices and flour like a little stream of liquid caramel sunshine. Ginger was the undisputed star here, sharp and warm and wonderfully assertive, but the cane syrup softened its edges until it tasted bold without being harsh or overwhelming. The dough came together into a dark, fragrant mass that she rolled into small balls and placed on the baking sheet with the quiet confidence of someone who had made these exact cookies for more decades than anyone could count. When they baked, they spread into soft, chewy round with edges just crisp enough to give each bite a little snap before melting into tender sweetness. The flavor was rich, bright, warm, and unmistakably Southern in the best possible way. These cookies tasted like stories passed down by word of mouth rather than written recipes, like winters spent in warm homes, like the sweet resourcefulness that kept families going long before anyone thought to write anything down. Holiday fruit bar cookies. Holiday fruit bar cookies were Grandma's gentler, infinitely kinder answer to fruitcake, which everyone claimed to hate but somehow kept getting passed around anyway. Instead of being dense or overly rich or packed with mystery fruits nobody could identify, these bars were soft, light, and filled with just enough dried fruit to make them feel appropriately festive without overwhelming anyone's taste buds. She would fold chopped dates, golden raisins, or candied cherries into a warmly spiced batter that smelled like winter the absolute moment it hit the mixing bowl. The bars baked into perfect golden squares with soft centers and slightly chewy edges, the fruit gleaming like little jewels scattered throughout. Once they cooled completely, she would sprinkle just a bit of powdered sugar across the top, enough to make them look like they had been lightly dusted with fresh snow. They were the kind of cookie that showed up at every holiday gathering without ever needing an introduction or explanation. They tasted like warmth, kindness, and the softer side of Christmas, the part that is built on sharing rather than showing off. These bars were nostalgia baked into every bite, a gentle reminder of quieter holidays when dessert was more about comfort than display. Butter pecan crisps. Butter pecan crisps were the kind of Christmas cookie that snapped satisfyingly between your teeth, all thanks to Grandma's habit of toasting the pecans first until the whole kitchen smelled warm and nutty and utterly irresistible. She would spread them across a baking sheet and slide them into the oven, watching carefully because the line between perfectly toasted and slightly burned was thinner than anyone wanted to admit. Once they cooled, she folded them into a dough that was rich with butter, the kind of butter that softened all the sharp edges of winter just by existing. These cookies baked thin and golden, spreading across the pan like little discs of concentrated flavor, and every bite delivered that unmistakable sweet toasty combination that pecan lovers still chase in every bakery they visit. They had none of the fussiness of decorated cookies or elaborate frosting swirls, just pure, honest flavor that spoke for itself without needing any help. Grandma kept them in old tins lined with wax paper, stacked carefully so they would not break, and somehow they stayed perfectly crunchy for days, as if the holiday spirit itself was helping to preserve them. Cornflake Christmas Cookies. Cornflake Christmas cookies were one of those brilliant mid-century inventions that made you wonder how anyone ever thought of using breakfast cereal in a holiday recipe, and then immediately made you grateful someone had been brave enough to try. Grandma would crush the cornflakes just enough to break them into smaller pieces while keeping most of their crunch intact, then fold them into a sweet, sticky mixture that somehow transformed into golden mounds of crispy, crunchy bliss. The sugar-coated cereal gave each bite a delicate crackle, the kind of sound you could actually hear if the house was quiet enough and you were paying attention. These cookies were fun without trying to be fancy, affordable without tasting cheap or disappointing. They were the kind of treat kids grabbed with both hands while racing through the kitchen, and grown-ups pretended were just okay even while reaching for a second and then a third. The texture alone made them unforgettable, that perfect marriage of chewy sweetness and crispy crunch all wrapped up in holiday joy. Crispy lard cookies. Crispy lard cookies might sound strange to modern ears, but back then they were an absolute holiday staple, because lard gave them a texture and lightness that butter simply could not replicate no matter how hard tried. Grandma used what she had, and what she had consistently made magic happen in her kitchen. She mixed the dough until it turned smooth and almost whipped, then rolled it out thin to cut into whatever shapes felt right that day, stars or trees or simple circles. They baked in a light, wonderfully crisp cookies with just a hint of richness underneath, never greasy or heavy the way people always assumed they would be. The flavor was subtle but deeply satisfying, and the texture was genuinely unmatched, delicate and airy and perfectly crunchy in every bite. These cookies proved beyond any doubt that humble, practical ingredients could create something truly extraordinary when handled with care and respect. They were the kind of treat families remembered fondly long after lard disappeared from most American kitchens entirely. Frosted Spice Bars. Frosted Spice Bars were the kind of Christmas treat that did not look particularly fancy sitting on the dessert table, but somehow managed to feel like the warm, beating heart of the entire spread. Grandma would mix the batter with every warm spice she owned, opening jar after jar until the kitchen filled with the smell of cinnamon, cloves, allspice, and ginger long before the oven was even preheated. The batter baked into a soft, fragrant sheet that made the entire house feel at least 10 degrees warmer the second she pulled it out. Then came the icing, and this was where Grandma really showed off without meaning to. She whisked together a simple powdered sugar glaze, never measuring a single thing, because her hands somehow knew the exact right consistency every time. She poured it over the still warm bars and let it melt slightly, spreading into a smooth, snowy layer that crackled slightly when you cut through it with a knife. Each bite was tender, sweet, and absolutely loaded with holiday spice without ever feeling heavy or overwhelming. These were the bars that disappeared before dinner was even served, the ones adults cut into just a taste, and kids begged for seconds before they had finished their firsts. They tasted simple and comforting, exactly the way Christmas used to feel before everything got so complicated. Cinnamon Sugar Crisps. Cinnamon Sugar Crisps were the kind of cookie that made the whole house smell like Christmas long before anyone actually saw them cooling on the counter. Grandma would roll the dough paper thin, working it with her rolling pin until you could practically see through it, then coat it generously with cinnamon and sugar until the surface sparkled like something pulled straight from a holiday greeting card. When they baked, they puffed just slightly and crackled at the edges, creating a texture so light and delicate it felt like biting into a sugared snowflake. The cinnamon warmed you from the inside out with every bite, and the sweetness hit at exactly the right moment without being overwhelming. These were the cookies people mindlessly snacked on while trimming the tree or wrapping presents. The ones you swore you would only eat one of and then quietly took 3 more when nobody was watching. They had no frosting, no decorations, no clever tricks, just simple, perfect flavor that Grandma never once felt the need to change or improve. Peanut butter press cookies. Peanut butter press cookies were the pantry staple miracle Grandma pulled out when she wanted something sweet without making a big production out of it. Peanut butter was always sitting in the cupboard, and with just a few other basics like flour, sugar, and maybe an egg if she remembered to buy them, she could create cookies that tasted like pure childhood compressed into disc form. The iconic crisscross 4 pattern came next, and watching her press those tines into each ball of dough was half the fun. 2 quick movements that flattened the cookies and left them looking like tiny works of homemade art. They baked into soft, chewy rounds with just enough crispness around the edges to give each bite the perfect texture balance. The smell filled the kitchen with warm, nutty sweetness that made everyone hover near the cooling rack like they were magnets being pulled by an invisible force. These cookies were simple, practical, and completely unforgettable in their straightforward goodness. The kind of treat that showed how a handful of ordinary ingredients could carry an entire holiday memory forward through decades. Every home had some version of them, but Grandma's always tasted better, probably because she never once rushed a single step. Molasses Raisin Chews. Molasses Raisin Chews were the soft, wonderfully sticky treasures Grandma kept tucked inside her worn cookie tin. The one that always seemed to magically refill itself no matter how many cookies everyone ate. The dough was dark and intensely fragrant with molasses, warm spices, and just enough plump raisins to give each bite a little burst of concentrated sweetness. As they baked, they filled the entire house with that familiar molasses warmth, the kind of smell that lingered in the curtains and furniture long after the oven had been turned off. The cookies stayed perfectly chewy for days, their edges firm but never hard, their centers soft enough to feel like edible comfort itself. They tasted like old-fashioned Christmas, the kind that was rooted in memory and tradition rather than decoration and display. Every cookie in that battered tin held a story waiting to be remembered, and every bite felt like opening one of those stories and stepping inside for just a moment. Old-style shortbread rounds. Old-style shortbread rounds were the absolute definition of simplicity, but they somehow managed to feel like the most luxurious treat sitting on the entire holiday table. Grandma would blend butter, sugar, and flour together with the kind of patience only she truly possessed, working the dough entirely by hand until it came together smooth and soft without ever getting tough or overworked. She shaped the rounds using whatever she had available, sometimes old bottle tops, sometimes biscuit cutters, sometimes just a drinking glass turned upside down. She pressed each piece into perfect circles that baked into buttery, melt-in-your-mouth cookies with edges that were never entirely uniform. And that was precisely half the charm. Shortbread did not need bells and whistles or fancy decorations or anything beyond itself. It just needed care and time, 2 things Grandma always made room for in December no matter how busy the season got. Each bite tasted like pure butter drifting across your tongue, warm and rich and comforting in a way only truly old-fashioned recipes can possibly achieve. They were proof that sometimes the simplest things are actually the most memorable. Maple syrup cookies. Maple syrup cookies were winter wrapped in dough, the kind of cookie that tasted like the quiet warmth of a snow day, spent entirely indoors with nowhere to go and nothing that needed doing. Grandma would pour maple syrup, sometimes the real stuff someone had brought back from Vermont, sometimes the store-bought kind that did the job just fine, into a mixing bowl and let its deep sweetness sink into every part of the batter. The cookies baked into soft, fragrant rounds that carried that unmistakable maple aroma throughout the house. Sweet but never overwhelming, rich but never heavy. They were the kind of treat you instinctively paired with hot tea or warm milk, eating them slowly so you could savor every single bite and make the moment last as long as possible. Their sweetness was gentle and earthy and wonderfully comforting, the kind of flavor that settled into your memory and stayed there long after the last cookie disappeared from the tin. They tasted like fireplaces crackling in the living room, heavy wool blankets draped over armchairs, and holiday evenings where everything felt calm and peaceful for once. Honey Spice Buttons. Honey Spice Buttons were the small, chewy cookies Grandma made when she wanted something sweet but not overly sugary, something that felt like a treat without being an indulgence. Honey was the main sweetener here, thick and golden and floral, warming the dough with its natural richness before she added cinnamon, cloves, or whatever spices remained in her cabinet after a long baking season. The cookies baked into small round bites that were wonderfully soft in the center and lightly crisp around the edges, with a deep, cozy flavor that wrapped around you like a favorite sweater. These were the cookies she kept in glass jars on the kitchen counter, the ones you sneaked when you thought she was not looking, even though she absolutely knew and never said a word about it. They tasted like comfort, like quiet evenings when the only sound was the wind outside, like winter nights where the only light came from the Christmas tree glowing softly in the corner of the living room. Vanilla Bean Snowball Cookies. Vanilla Bean Snowball cookies looked exactly like little edible ornaments dusted in powdered sugar, and Grandma always made them so tender they practically melted the moment they touched your tongue. She would scrape a real vanilla bean, back when they were still considered a special treat rather than an everyday ingredient, and mix those tiny black seeds into a soft, buttery dough that smelled like pure heaven. The cookies baked into tender, crumbly rounds that were still warm when she rolled them generously in powdered sugar, giving each one that snowy white coat everyone recognized instantly. They were small, impossibly light, and rich all at the same time, tiny treasures that disappeared fast from every holiday plate they landed on. When you bit into one, the vanilla bloomed across all your senses at once, soft and fragrant and beautiful, reminding you exactly why some recipes manage to stay alive in family memories, even when they never get written down on paper. These cookies were delicate, deeply nostalgic, and absolutely impossible not to love. So which of these forgotten cookies do you remember from your own childhood? Which ones did your grandma make that filled the house with smells you can still recall perfectly even now? Drop a comment and let me know which cookie brought back the strongest memory. And if you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, go ahead and subscribe because there are plenty more nostalgic journeys where this came from. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.